You know, full credit where credit's due. I was, for a while now, looking at the GR Supra, and I remember being so excited when it was announced. I particularly loved the yellow color, and I was like, finally, you know, Toyota's bringing back the Supra. Finally, they're doing the right thing. Until I saw it for the first time. And I have to say, I'm a little bit worried about the direction that Toyota's going in. They seem to be unstoppable as a brand, as a company, with such a loyal following. I mean, look at me. Growing up, I might have had a Skyline in the driveway. My sister might have driven a Mazda, but there was always one or two Toyotas sitting in the driveway at our family's house. You could definitely say that I'm a Toyota fanboy, and I have been, not just because I like the brand and things like that, but because I've driven old Land Cruisers, one with over 500,000 kilometers on its original unopened engine, across Australia. And this was many years ago when I was a lot younger and a lot more naive, and things could have gone wrong, but they didn't. And then later on, when I sold that and bought another Land Cruiser, I did the same thing, and that had high kilometers and it was a petrol, not a diesel. Again, the same thing. It never let me down. And the thing is, you don't know about quality until you don't have it. So I guess I was kind of spoiled. We grew up with Japanese cars, Toyotas, Nissans, Mazdas, things like that. And we always assumed that, well, we just had normal, boring cars. And it was only when I bought a Ford and it started breaking down and having like issues and headliners collapsing and things like that, that I realized, well, you know, I kind of miss my Nissan. And then later on, I bought a Holden, and that had the same issues. That blew a head gasket just driving normally, and had gearbox issues. The headlining was falling apart on that. There was door rattles, and you had power windows up the front and manual windows in the back, and you're just wondering, like, why do you really need to save that much money? And then you realize, you know what, growing up we had all the features in our Japanese cars and things like that, and Toyota was number one. Especially for reliability, they held on to their value the most. They always seem to build adequate things. And then when I saw the new GR Supra come out, and that's right about the time that Toyota switched from TRD to GR as well, and I was kind of disappointed in that because, yeah, I get that, you know, the company's grandson or whatever, Toyota's grandson, started the racing. I don't know the full story. All I know is that, you know, they changed an entire heritage, the naming of an entire heritage just for one guy and his accomplishments, whereas TRD was out there before Toyota was known for anything, and TRD paved the way for their reputation. So I was like, kind of like, oh well, you know, Mitsubishi dropped Rally Art and Mazda dropped Mazda Speed because, well, they weren't making any more performance cars. And then they announced the GR Supra. I watched Jay Leno's show where they had the FT1 concept come in, and I was like, wow, that looks really good, but there was still something a little off about it, and I just didn't like it. Or did I like it? And it, you know, it's kind of like when you see, you know, a pretty girl and you're like, there's something off about her, but I'm not sure if I don't like her or if I absolutely love her. You know, like Anya Taylor-Joy. I'm trying to make a point here. I realize now that I absolutely hate the GR Supra. It is... Why did I do that? What? Yeah, look. First and foremost, this is not a Toyota, right? I mean, everyone's been on the bandwagon. I'm not a car journalist, but everyone has spoken about it being a BMW. But it's not just that pees me off about it. It's not that it's not a Toyota. It mainly comes down to two things. The first thing is that it's too awkward looking. It's too short and stubby. If you look at, I mean, any JDM performance car from the 90s, they all had like a sense of elegance to them. Why do I not know how to use a computer? So if you look at that, the elegance of that compared to the new Supra is just night and day. The proportions were just elegant. They're just beautiful. Long bonnet, big door, and then a long sloping back, a fastback. Just like the new Mustang isn't a short, stubby little, you know, the Mustangs that you can go out and buy at the moment. They're not short, stubby little aggressive, pumped up things. They have that elegance, the right proportions that we come to expect from Mustangs. So this angry little bubbly looking thing, it just doesn't do it for me. When you look at like the 300ZX, the Skylines of the era, even the 180SX, and even the RX-7, which is quite a small car, the proportions of it was equal. It still had the long sloping fastback on the RX-7, the long bonnet, and the adequately sized door. And this one just doesn't do it for me. Toyota say that the GR Supra was designed to be that wheelbase and that size for absolute perfect weight distribution. But the thing is, it's not really a supercar, is it? If it was like a Maserati MC20 or a new Ferrari, and it was short and stubby and they said it's for absolute perfect weight distribution, you'd understand it because it's a supercar. The difference between a supercar and a sports car for me is chuckability and the ability to have fun with it. A supercar is a bit too focused for you to be able to power slide out of wet roundabouts and things like that easily. I mean, you could do it, but you couldn't do it easily, especially in like an analog supercar. You try doing it in a Lamborghini Diablo or something and it'll be the last time you ever power slide the thing. But with this, they wanted it to be the most focused, the most perfectly balanced sports car. Then they put in a torque converter automatic, and they refused to give anyone a manual only up until what, this year? So to me it's like, well, I think you've got your wires crossed, Toyota. The second thing that if I had the money even, I could not buy it. I couldn't do it to myself, is the number of fake vents on it. So if you look at the number of fake vents on the GR Supra, it is just incredible as to how many fake vents they allowed on this car. Let's look at it here. Now, I understand that not every car out there needs the full open front vent, the grille on the front bumper for airflow, because it might just be fine with the center of it open and the sides can be closed off, but it would look awkward if, you know, it just had one little center vent. So there's a certain limit to fake vents. And again, the old Supra, the old GTR, the old RX-7, the old MR2s, the old NSX, the old GTIR Pulsar, none of them had fake vents. If a car manufacturer released a car with fake vents back then, you would be seen as the ultimate loser, the ultimate poser buying it. But these have sold like hotcakes. Not only do you have fake vents on the front bumper, but then the one that really gets me is this like slit up around here that is just there for no reason. This entire groove is there for no reason whatsoever. It's just there to house a piece of black plastic. Then you move on to the bonnet, and the bonnet has two fake vents, one on each side, as if it were there to cool the engine, or as if this vent here opened up, cooled the brakes, and then escaped up here, providing some sort of aerodynamic flow. Unfortunately, they're both fake. Then you have the fake door vents here. Now, you would think that when you open this door here, you would find that there's an actual vent in the door frame that cools the rear brakes, and then it exits out the back diffuser. No, just like the front, this is closed off. It's not cooling the brakes and then flowing up the top of the car. This is closed off. It's not cooling anything. It's just a piece of plastic over another piece of plastic molding on the door. And then if you looked at the rear view of this car, it's got fake vents on the rear bumper. Again, just makes absolutely no sense to me. Why you would have fake cooling vents on the rear bumper here, coming down from the tail lights? Is it to cool the guy's headlights behind you? I don't get it. So I was really disappointed when I saw that for the first time as well. And a Toyota marketing person said that they've put these vents in place for tuners because Toyota understands its customers. They know that the car's going to be tuned, just like in the 90s and the early 2000s, and then tuners can then remove the vents and then get cooling for additional things that they put in. Unfortunately though, YouTubers have tried to remove those vents and to see what it can cool and what they can duct back there. First and foremost, it's almost impossible to remove them. It is extremely difficult to remove those vents. Secondly, there's nothing to cool back there. You can't duct it to anything. So it turns out that Toyota built a fake Toyota that's too short and stubby, with a fake sense of tuning and tunability within it, and then laced it with fake vents. It is just a disappointment. It's completely fake. You don't get any enjoyment out of fake bits of plastic and fake grooves and cutouts in the front bumper, other than pose value, and anyone that's worth anything will know that it's fake and worthless. So I don't really know who they were marketing this car for. I know that Toyota went over to Germany and they packaged up 4 or 5 engines out of the production line in Germany, shipped it to headquarters in Japan, and then they discovered that there's a whole bunch of things that was just going to fall apart with that engine, BMW, and they made some changes. Ultimately, in my opinion, what Toyota did was they sent over an entire pallet of Toyota badges to Germany, and then on a bit of cardboard on top of the pallet they scribbled out the design for this thing, and then BMW made it. It's a disappointment, and I think it's embarrassing to compare it to the stunning, elegant beauty here, which was just right. It just had that right poise, the way it sat, the way it sounded, the way it felt. And I have been in them, I have driven them when these were just normal cars. And I mean, they weren't just normal cars, they were always special. There were less Supra RZs around than there were Skyline GTRs, and there were a lot of GTRs rolling around Auckland. You would hear them throughout the night. You would be sitting outside having a cigarette, or you'd be at a barbecue at a friend's house or something, and you'd hear tearing up the street down the road, and it was sort of echoing around the entire city. And these weren't as common then, but every time you saw a Supra, everyone stopped and took notice. And this one here just looks like it's out to get attention, whereas this one just commanded attention just by being who it is. It didn't have to make a song and dance about it, and that's what this car is to me. The new GR Supra is just a big song and dance. It's a big look at me, look at my car. Like, it's got the haunches and the arches and look at my vents, grills and it's like, what this car is like a pimp with gold teeth. And the old Mark IV Supra was James Bond. Anyway, I've said a lot of nasty things about Nissan over the years. If you were to ask me in 1999 which car manufacturer would be at the top of their game and the top of the world, in 2020, hands down, not just me, but all of my friends as well, we would have said Nissan. Like, Nissan was just the coolest car manufacturer around back then. They had something for everyone. If you went to a party and as a teenager or something, and someone pulled out like a Nissan key, you always thought, like, I wonder what they had. It could have been a GTI Pulsar, it could have been a 180SX or a Fairlady, or it could have been a Skyline GTS-T or a GTS-4 or a Nissan Stagea. They just had such cool cars. They just did awesome stuff. Like, they were ahead of the times. So nowadays it's very common for car manufacturers to build a platform, and then on that platform they'll build like 2 or 3 different car models, and they might have like one 4-cylinder turbo engine that they might put in this model, and then they might use it in an SUV, and then they might use it in a wagon, and then they'll put it into like a big 4-wheel drive as well, just like the one engine with different tunes into everything. Well, Nissan was doing that in the late 80s. Nissan built like a bunch of different platforms, and instead of having one like 4-cylinder turbo engine, they had like 3. Instead of one straight 6, they had like 11. Instead of one diesel engine, they had like 5. And it wasn't like they had 2 4-cylinder engines and then they built one special high performance turbocharged dock 16 valve engine for like the ultimate rare model. They built these 4-cylinder engines, put it in all the boring cars that sold to normal boring people, made them money, and then they were like, let's take like a Nissan Bluebird sedan, and someone said, why don't we put an SR20 GT in it? And that was so cool. They're like, yeah, okay. Yeah, let's put an SR20 GT in a normal Bluebird sedan. And then someone would say, should we give it like the Atessa all-wheel drive system? And they're like, yeah, why not? Why not? Let's do it and see how crazy it gets. But not everyone can afford the SR20. Okay, let's put the 1.8 Dock Turbo in there as well. So they just made all these cool cars. And I never saw Nissan coming off that throne. But obviously the financial crisis, the recession had a big toll on them. Bad management, bad leadership. A lot of different things happened, and Nissan basically shat the bed. And they never fully recovered. We went from respecting like the Navaras and the Nissan Safaris and all the 4 drives they built to like, you know, worshipping Skyline GTRs and stuff, until all the kids on YouTube ruined it for me now, because every time you see a GTR, I remember seeing it at the drag strip, at the racetracks, in my friend's garage. I had a Skyline myself, it wasn't a GTR, but just driving them normally. And now when you see GTR on YouTube, it's always at like a Walmart car park or a McDonald's car park at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's just sitting like, that's not what it was built for, and it just sounds crap. They've made it sound like new cars, which are fabricated to make those pops and crackles and sound like that. These older things, they just did it organically. They made those pops and crackles naturally when you downshifted and you just let off the throttle, and they would burble and crackle and pop. Today you turn a dial on the dashboard to like from normal to sport, and all of a sudden it's like, and I live in an apartment in Perth, and I hear it like every day, every 10 minutes. I remember when I first moved here and you heard that whoop, bop, 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 and I would be like, oh, it's got to be like a Ferrari 458 or something. And you'd look out, and sure enough, it was a Ferrari 488 or a McLaren or a Lamborghini or something. Now you hear, and you go, and it's like a Hyundai hatchback. And then 10 minutes later, you'll hear the same thing. Like, you'd think it's a supercar coming by, popping and crackling and this and that. And it's like this ginormous black Mercedes SUV. So it's kind of lost that luster that it had. It's just fabricated and fake. But anyway, Nissan had all of these cool cars. And they then shut the bed. They started making crappy stuff. I was working at a workshop a few years ago out in Queensland, and the workshop was just always booked in with Nissan Navaras. The engineering had gotten so bad that they put the engine so far back in the engine bay that when owners were starting these cars and they got to 3-4 years old, the engine was like moving back and forth and basically bashing the firewall in. Then the frame started bending and twisting in half, and this is Australia and New Zealand and stuff, so not North America where you have salted roads and rust and things like that. These utes were just breaking in half without any rust. And so I was really critical of Nissan, and I never thought that they would recover, but they have. Recently I discovered that while Toyota killed off the TRD nameplate and Mitsubishi killed off Rally Art and Mazda Speed and things like that, and most of these manufacturers stopped making performance cars, Nissan kept Nismo alive, quietly running in the background in Japan. And they could have closed it down, they could have repurposed the Nismo facility, which is a pretty big warehouse, but they didn't. Nismo is still producing parts, still rebuilding, and now even restoring old Skylines and old Nissan performance cars. Factory reconditioning. And they're not just reconditioning them, they're actually still modifying them. So you can buy like an R32 GTR or an R34 GTR and send it to Nismo in Japan, and they will do whatever you want to it. You can walk in there, and it's not so much saying I want to make 1,000 horsepower. They'll probably slap you and tell you to go away. But you can go there and say I want responsiveness and drivability for like road use, and they'll build you it, right down to like custom seats and things like that. Craftsman. And for a manufacturer to be doing that, 20 years after the last great production performance car that they built, is pretty impressive that they kept that alive. They're also doing things to like normal cars. Like there's a video in Japan, I don't know what it's called, it's all in Japanese, where a lady bought a Nissan Seema, brand new, when she was I think just out of university. She's quite old now, and they took that and Nismo basically restored it to a brand new Nissan Seema for her. So just doing cool stuff. Toyota and Mazda recently announced that, yeah, we're going to start selling, the air vent knobs for the old Supra and the door handles that kept breaking for the RX-7 as part of their Heritage Parts program, whereas Nissan will sell you a complete RB26 fully worked for your Skyline. So I think that's commendable. The new Nissan Z just came out. Well, it didn't just come out, it was just announced to the public and officially launched a few months ago. Yeah, I think that beating heart of Nissan has always been within their performance division. And I think because they never let that die, I do honestly think that Nissan will bounce back. Now, I'm going to eat my words, and if I did have the money, credit where credit's due, I would buy the new Nissan Z. They haven't shortened it. It's not as short and stubby as a GR Supra. They've actually lengthened it a little bit. They've used the old 350 and 370Z's platform. Now, as a JDM car guy who grew up with JDM cars, all my friends grew up with JDM cars, the 350 and 370Z were the two cars that none of us cared about. In fact, if you were to crush a Toyota Prius in front of me, I would feel like I would feel pain. I'd be like, it's a nice car. Like it's not a sports car. It's not trying to be anything. It's just a nice car. But if you bought a brand new mint condition 370Z Nismo to me and crushed it in front of me, by the time I got home, I'd probably forget what color it was. They just didn't do anything for me. You went from like C18 DETs to SR20s to RBs and TD42, all these cool engines and stuff, to like just naturally aspirated V6 and stuff. And again, like the GR Supra, like really short and bubbly and kind of like awkward looking, like it's just, if you were filming an action movie and your lead character was going to have like a knife fight or something, you wouldn't give him like a small folding pocket knife like that you used to open letters because it's got the perfect weight distribution and things like that, a little bubbly thing like cute. No, you'd give him like a big, elegant like hunting knife, like spikes and jagged edges and things like that. That's what the older cars were. Like you compare the 300ZX to the 350 or the 370, and the 350, 370 looks like a toy you'd give to a toddler. Anyway, credit where credit's due. The 400Z is a brilliant car. Old chassis that's been reworked, just like every other. The brand new 2023 Ford Ranger is just a new car on a heavily revised previous model's chassis. It's not the same chassis. It's just that they took the architecture of the old one and they made it work. 400 horsepower. It's got the nice interior, like multicolored interiors with different colored piping and stitching. It's what people want. It makes you feel special when you open the door. It looks nice. They didn't just focus on one era of Nissan sports car. They brought in the Fairlady Z. The steering wheel was designed off of the R32 GTR steering wheel. So they took inspiration from all of their greats. It tells me that the beating heart of Nissan is waking up again. And I know that they've had a whole lot of issues with, the CEO and things like that, but without drama in a family, life gets pretty boring. And I think it's kept Nissan honest, and it's kept Nissan on its toes. I'm really excited to see what they do. If I had the money out of any sports car out there at the moment, I think Nissan would deserve my money the most. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about cars for a bit because I like cars. Thanks for your time. Goodbye.